Good morning, and welcome to another edition of Mama Watoro Talks. This talk comes to you from a place of peace and utmost love. So, a very good morning from Glasgow, Scotland. Mama Watoro here. Beautiful, nice, crisp and cold morning here in Scotland. But here we are, we're still forcing outdoor issues. I know. The beautiful thing is that it's not windy as it was last month, so I'm able to record outside. It's a bit chilly, but it's bearable. Mama Watoro, karibu sana to Mama Watoro Talks. Today, Mama Watoro and her stories. So today we're going to talk about starting all over and moving to the village. My experience as a 15-year-old who moved to the village, at the peak of my teenage years. So, I was about 15 years old when I moved to the village. I was just joining Form 1. So before that, let me just rewind. Let's rewind. So I was born in Kisumu, and I was born in Victoria Hospital around Milimani. So funny thing is that later on I ended up going to primary school in the same area where I was born. And then I spent about 15 years growing up in Kisumu, did my nursery, primary, and all that jazz in Kisumu city. So I know Kisumu, and that is where my memories as a child, my childhood memories are planted. But then again, one morning, just before we went to high school, we finished our shopping, we are ready, we're prepared, we're going to high school. My father called all of us, the five of us, we are 5 in my family, we are 2 girls and 3 boys, sat us down. My father was in the Ministry of Education, and he had a background in teaching as well. So as you can imagine, if you were raised by a teacher, he was one of those people who would randomly call a family meeting and sit the 5 of us down and then talk to us about life, which is, I think, that really shaped the person that I am. So growing up, my father was that kind of person. He was very open about everything that happened in life, but then again, he was very curly. So, if your parent was a teacher, you know what I'm talking about. So my father sits us down and casually informs us that we are moving to the village. So this was the statement. He was like, I hope you all know where your village is. We never really used to frequent the village as such, even though we lived in Kisumu and my village was not too far away. We probably went once or twice a year or 3 times a year. But come to think about it, when I was about 8 or 9, studying in Kisumu in a school called the Memsha, we actually moved to the village. So my father had attempted to live in the village before. This was not the first time. I think we did like 2 times. So he would drive us to school every morning and then pick us in the evening and go back to the village. So that, and for some reason, we ended up moving back to Kisumu. But hey, my father is my father. He's not the kind of person you want to go and ask why this is happening the way it is. He makes all the decisions, and the rest of the family just tour along. So we had tried this before, but this time things were different because we were going to high school. So I have a brother who is the 4th born in my family, my immediate follower. Both of us were joining Form 1. So this is what happened. So we were asked if we knew our village, and I had a slight idea of where the village was. I'd never gone there by public transport, but I knew that I was from Lela, Karateng, Kisumu. That is my village. It's about 20 minutes drive from Kisumu. It's not that far. So we were told we're going to the village, and we know where our village was. And that is how the news of us moving to the village was relayed to the 5 of us. You can imagine the shock, the horror, the confusion. How now? But the beauty of it all is that we were moving to high school, so we're going to spend a lot of our time in boarding school. So that is what happened. So we go to boarding school, and then when we closed school, found my way to the village, public transport, got off at the right stage and made my way to my village. So at that point in my life, my grandmother, God rest her soul in peace, was still alive. So I think that's one of the reasons why my father wanted to move to the village, to be closer to his mom, because she was getting old and he wanted to take care of her. But looking back now, it made total sense because we were living in the town, in Kisumu town, and our village was not that far from the town. So why would my father want to pay school fees for the 5 of us and try and live in the city? So we were not that rich, we were not poor, but we were not rich. We were middle class family. So I can imagine when the 4 of us were in high school, and my youngest brother, the last born, was in a private school as well. So I don't think my father was able to manage to sustain that kind of lifestyle living in the city. I mean, you cannot compare. So we went to the village, and living in the village, my father had built a house when we were younger. When I was about, I think, 8, my father built a 3-bedroom house in the village. Beautiful house. So when we went there, of course, it was village life back then in the early 2000s. We did not have electricity, no running water. You can imagine, no, the TV was not working because there was no electricity, and we didn't have a solar panel at that point. So the only thing we had was each other, the 5 of us. Lots of books, because my father is a reader, from Shakespeare to Charles Dickens. He will read all that. So we read all these books, and we spent a lot of time around just bonding with each other. Because then again, we were not allowed to prance from one homestead to the rest. My father is a very private person, and he did talk to, the villagers. He mingles, he blends in. He was happy to be in his village, as you can imagine. And for the first time in my life, I saw my father laugh a lot. Like, he was truly happy to be amongst his people. So we were not allowed to move around. So then what happens is that, we'd just spend hours and hours talking to each other, or reading books, or listening to the radio. Back then there was Sundowner, so I would listen to Sundowner while doing dishes in the evening. And then that was our village life. But it was not easy for us because we were so used to living in the town. I keep on wanting to say the city, where life was so fast. There was so much going on around us. We had the prime of our teenagehood, so we were making friends. We are moving around, in the estate when my dad is not around, of course. And you can imagine, life in the village was a complete opposite. So we're getting to know our relatives in the village, our uncles. And then, of course, there'd be those uncles who used to drink a lot, like distant cousins to my dad, or first cousins. So it was just a new experience, seeing people drinking the local brew. It's called changa in my village. But they were happy people. They were just, there were women drinking as well, which was new to us, because I never knew that women drank. All the drunks we saw in Kisumu were mostly men. So, hey, welcome to the village. We saw all that. But all in all, they were very happy people. So I think in our homestead, we were the only ones in the village, because all my other cousins were living in the city. And then, so it was just 5 of us. So we would stay in the village, and then during the holidays, we would go back to school. So I don't think we really felt the impact that much. So one thing I wanted to say is that due to this pandemic, a lot of people have lost their jobs. If you're one of those people who've lost your jobs, and you have a village to go to, you're lucky enough to have a place that your father calls his home, or whatever, do not be scared to go to the village. It is not the worst thing that can happen to your children. I led that life, and looking back, I think that was one of the most beautiful times in my life, because there was all this space around us. There were all these trees, and where I come from, it's very fertile, so we always had fruits. Every tree was an avocado there, and a mango there, and there's this fruit called jamna. I don't know if you know it, but it was just a beautiful experience, waking up to all this greenery and the mountains, and just looking out. It was not a bad experience. So do not be afraid. And then, so we'd go back to school and come back. But hey, that happiness in the 3-bedroom house was short-lived, because I quickly realized that according to my customs, the culture of the Luo people, my father was supposed to build his own home. So we had to move from my grandparents' house into our own home, because my father is the firstborn in his village. So one early morning, according to our customs, we woke up, and my father carried, I think, a panga and something else. And there was my elder brother, and then the rest of the brothers, my mom, and the girls moved to our new site where we were going to start our home. So we're moving out of my grandparents' home. But then my grandfather passed on when I was about 7 years old. Very lovely man, Zeombija. So we moved. And when we moved, according to our customs, you start by building mud house. Yeah, you know those kind of houses. If you grew up in the village, or if you're African, you know these things. So my father started by, English words, my goodness. He was in charge of the foundation, and then put up the first pole, that, this pole, it's the pole that is in the middle of the house that helps the house stand firm. So that's what the firstborn does, together with his father, then the person who was leading him, taking the lead to the new home, because his own father had passed on. And then it was a beautiful day, because what happened is that the whole village was involved. So the women in the village, once the men put up the structure, the skeleton structure of the house, the poles and the roof, I think the roof came in last. Then the women came in and then helped to mix up the mud and then touch the walls of the house. And it was just beautiful. So there was lots of food, lots of singing, and the whole village just came together to help us put up our first home, which was, I think, a 3-room house, because they made room for a sitting room. It was just a skeleton structure. And then there was a parents' bedroom, and then there was the girls' bedroom. But at this point, according to my tradition, the boys were officially moving into their own houses as well. So my big brother got his house erected on the same day, and then that was the beginning of his manhood. He was moved from my parents' house to his house. So that is what happened. And then fast forward, I think we went back to school, and then for some reason, I think I don't remember being with the rest of my siblings, because my older siblings were in Form 3 and Form 4, so they had to go back for holiday tuition. And then my father put up a new structure and started building the house that we currently live in. So it was a lot of work for me. There were so many people working in the construction site, so I had to wake up in the morning and prepare food. Living in the village is just a whole new experience, and I think it has contributed a lot to the person that I am today. If I did not move to the village, I don't know what would have become of us, like living in the city. I have no idea, because I think what I usually tell myself is I'm probably like a mixed child, mixed races, because I have the experience of living in the city as well as living in the village. So that is where I learned where my food comes from. I did not dig, because I considered myself a child who was very strong and very involved, but like physical digging was one of the things that I just didn't like. But we were involved in the whole process of harvesting, taking out the harvest every day in the morning so that it could dry in the sun, removing the maize from the cobs and then bagging them. So we knew where our food came from. So, and then a lot of other things. That is where I learned how to grow vegetables. My mom is such a farmer. She's the kind of person who will go to the garden in the morning, and she will keep the goats, the sheep, the chicken, all this stuff. So you can imagine, if you've grown up in the village, you know how tiring it can be. There was a lot going on. There was no time to sit down and start, thinking about your life in the village. There was always work to do. So that was my life in the village. So I stayed in the village. My father built the house, finished it. We moved from our mud house, and then we moved into the new shelter. And then after that, I think I finished high school, back and forth, village and school, and then went to uni, which was, at that point, I thought it was the most unfortunate thing for me, which was like about 10 minutes or 20 minutes walk from my village. It's in Maseno, and I'm from Maseno. So, but I enjoyed college life. So that is my experience moving from the city to the village. So I just want to encourage anyone out there who is struggling with the thought of moving out of the city. If you've lost your job and things are not easy for you, you're not able to pay your rent, you might not be able to pay school fees for your children when the school term begins in January, and you have a village to go to. Believe me, I grew up in the village, and it was not the worst thing that happened in my life. Actually, it was the best experience that we had as a family. So, do not insist on being in the city when you cannot afford being there. The reason as to why we go to the city, if you go to Nairobi, Kisumu, Eldoret, is to work. But if for some reason your job has ended or your business has not worked out, consider moving to the village. Start all over again. You know, it could be temporary, it could be permanent, but it's not the worst thing that can happen to you. So thank you so much for listening to Mama Watoto. I know I've been going on forever and ever and ever. Asante sana. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more videos like this and more from Mama Watotos and the Watoto. Asante and Oriti.